So it's the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace this year, and I remember it well because I had tickets on Friday for opening night and for the following Sunday, and it didn't take very long on that first watching for me to know that I really didn't want to watch it again. Just before The Revenge of the Sith came out, I watched it again as part of a 5-film IMAX marathon, but I last watched it probably before today anyway, when the trilogy box set came out with episode 3 in it, so probably about 20 years ago. And a lot of people said that this crawl with its tax roots and politics is part of the problem, but as the background to a story taking place within this setting, it is just fine. And that's because with a prequel, especially one like this one, you're going to be filling in backstory that we know. So if Star Wars itself is a 3-dimensional story, what you're doing here is flattening that out, making not just these stories, but the originals 2-dimensional rather than 3. And if you're boring enough, then you will take away the other dimension as well, and then you really aren't left with very much. So even though this is the backstory to the originals, they do need to create a new backstory to this one, and they don't do that very much, which is a shame because we'd be interested in questions like where did the Sith go, who were they in the first place? And now we're into the film proper, and we do have a problem because the pacing here, the exposition is all absolutely horrible, as is the dialogue, but mostly because it's cliche lines and they're in the wrong order. Qui-Gon Jinn says, "Tell them we wish to board at once," so that the audience know that they're being delayed and that the Jedi are in a hurry, yet they don't act at any point like they're being delayed or in a hurry.
Captain.
Yes, sir.
Tell them we wish to board at once.
With all due respect, the ambassadors for the Supreme Chancellor wish to board immediately.
The entire script is like this. People have to say what's going on because none of them act like they're in a living, breathing moment surrounded by genuine things or people. Now, this scene would be better off if it started with the pilots here, angry and frustrated. Why aren't they answering our signal? But instead, the music is wrong. This should be discordant, creating tension, not just a whimsical little flute line. Eventually, the captain says, "With all due respect, we wish to board immediately," and she sounds bored. If I say "with all due respect," I'm usually implying that none is actually due. With all due respect, the writer's an idiot. So she should start angry and the scene should start with her. These guys talk slowly and with lots of little pauses, possibly because the lines are being dubbed in later, but that means that their dialogue exchanges drag everything down, and it's very easy to cut them back to a minimum. Who needs it explained that these guys have a trade blockade? The movie is 2 minutes old, and if you have an attention span lower than 2 minutes, then you should know you're about to watch a movie with a 45-minute political scene.
The ambassadors for the Supreme Chancellor wish to board immediately.
Yes, of course. As you know, our blockade is perfectly legal, and we'd be happy to receive the ambassadors.
The ambassadors for the Supreme Chancellor wish to board immediately.
Yes, of course. Our blockade is perfectly legal, and we'd be happy to receive the ambassadors.
So far, so not very good, but there is a moment here which is just the moment when you know that this film is going to be terrible. You should already be suspecting, but here you should know. The ship comes in and these droids do this thing. But why? It barely has anything to do with them, but they all look awful and they're robots, but they're milling around with no purpose. And when they move, there's nothing of robotics or, again, purpose about them. Who walks with their arms crossed like this? Well, I don't think any humans do, but they're both doing it, so it must be a Jedi thing. So now we also know that the Jedi in this film are going to be boring. Instead of trying to put on the airs of stoicism, they should walk tall and straight. These are, in a way, the most powerful beings in a massive galaxy. They should be proud and confident. Their exchange is painful mystery men drivel. He who questions training only trains himself at asking questions. And it's frustrating watching these two. In the second movie, I actually like this guy more, but I wonder how much of it is down to him not having to deal with the other one. Everyone here is an idiot. The Jedi are idiots because they drink this stuff without attempting to do something about the danger they're sensing. Newt Gunray, etc. They're idiots because in literally 10 seconds, Darth Sidious is going to tell them to kill these two, and they could have done it with poison. And hey, stop writing in the comments, but they're Jedis. They would have detected the poison. Good. That would have shown all the parties involved as better. The bad guys is doing something sneaky, but at least doing something. The the Jedi mythos would be expanded and now they'd be proactively doing something too. The scene that follows, they could be phoning up Sidious saying, "Don't worry about the ambassadors, we took care of them," and then an explosion rocks the ship and Sidious can give them a look like, "You've underestimated the Jedi, idiots. Start your invasion now, find the Jedi and kill them." And we cut all of this and all the characters look better, and the first 20 minutes of a long movie can be down as short as 10. Having a ceiling cannon in your hangar is probably a Dr. Evil idea. He says, "Captain, look!" like he's in a panic, and neither of them do anything. People have to say what's going on because none of them act like they're in a living, breathing moment surrounded by genuine things or people. And this is so easily fixable because you just cut the shot of the cannon, then the dialogue, "Captain, look," and then the explosion immediately follows, and they don't have time to react. So it's just a question of just tidying up that edit and the problem's solved.
Captain, look! Look!
John Williams is working here. He's trying to make things tense, and we've got these idiots going "Roger, Roger" in their silly comedy voices. This actually would be a good shot without the dialogue and without previously establishing these droids as nonsense. So force speed is a thing because Lucas doesn't know how to write them out of a scene that he himself has written. Well, just have them start running before the droids start shooting. You still establish them as a threat because the heroes run away from them. How many times would force speed be handy, but they don't actually use it? And as we see, the droids can barely move while firing. They're really fast while not. There's a weakness there that the Jedi can expose. In the hangar, they're surprised to find battle droids, even though they were in the hangar when they arrived, and they just attacked them in the corridor. People have to say what's going on because none of them act like they're in a living, breathing moment surrounded by genuine things or people. You don't even need to say it's an invasion army because you just said it. This is a movie for kids, but even an 8-year-old can remember stuff from 2 minutes before if they care enough to. If Obi-Wan was like this more, it would really help this film. Ewan McGregor wants to have fun with this, but he just so rarely can. Queen Amidala phones them up. They have to say who she is because otherwise we as an audience wouldn't know. But they say, "At last," like she's been blanking them. But the next line is, "Again you come before us," like she's been phoning up subservient all the time. Which one is it? Because you have to pick one.
We must move quickly to disrupt all communications down there.
Why aren't you already doing that? Oh yeah, because you have to say a thing that lets you say a thing in the next scene, even though the latter and the whole invasion thing implies the former. This third repeat is for the 5-year-olds, I guess. Even though they aren't going to sit through your 45-minute political scene, you think that they will sit through the first 9 minutes of the film if you explain everything over and over.
Negotiate. Messages.
Senator Palpatine, what's happening?
Check the transmission generator.
A communications disruption can mean only one thing: invasion.
What's happening? This line, this shot, or just what's happening? Answer.
Negotiate. Messages.
Senator Palpatine.
Communications disruption can mean only one thing: invasion.
I always like this guy's delivery. It really shows that when you have an actor that can deal with George Lucas's bullshit, how much it exposes those that can't. Or maybe it's just that this guy also thinks that everyone else is stupid. You won't condone a course of action that will lead you to war. You're getting one whether you like it or not. What's fun here is that the Jedi are actually smart enough to stow away on a ship without being detected, but they're not smart enough to avoid exactly this sort of situation when they get to the other end. I'm pretty sure that 1980s George Lucas would have started the scene with Jar Jar picking flowers or something, and then the droids roll by and we get to this point and Qui-Gon and Jinn would just hop off the back and say, "Hello there." But why was he running at all? Because they just drive straight by. They weren't even chasing him. Just move aside and let them go. All this conversation is not required, but especially the bit where he tells him to go away, which only serves to make the audience question why they let him stay. If you don't say it, I don't think that anyone is thinking it. If only he could run really fast. Though it's odd that they are chasing Obi-Wan when none of them gave a shit about Qui-Gon. You could cut the scene together like this. Obi-Wan with some charm says, "It's dangerous out here." Jar Jar says the safest place to go is Gungan City, and then they go there. Great music again. I think John Williams should be the only one involved in this to come out with any credit at all. I like the idea of a species choosing to live underwater, but they need these force fields to keep the water out. Is that because of damp problems, or are our underwater dwellers not actually able to breathe underwater? Here's another good example of what's wrong with this movie. This scene is over at this point. Just fade out on Jar Jar. But then this happens. Why?
You are in big doo-doo this time. How?
It's absolutely horrible and horribly paced, and neither Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon are doing anything other than standing in front of a green screen, so they barely move through the whole thing. Ewan McGregor looks so clueless, he might even drool on himself. What does it say about him as a Jedi that he lets this happen? It matters so little to the story that Jar Jar is banished. Why bother to include it? Qui-Gon immediately gives up on the Gungans helping and uses the Jedi mind trick to con them out of a boat when he could, presumably, just as easily con them into fighting the invaders. Jar Jar could just go with them, but instead they have to persuade the boss to let him leave. Or if you wanted to play this like any of it actually matters, then when Jar Jar arrives, he should be immediately zapped by Captain Tarpals, and then he's on the ground going, no, these outsiders, they need to speak to the boss. And Tarpals tries to zap him again, and Obi-Wan just yanks him off the horse thing and points the zapper at him and says, "Take me to your leader," or something like that. Qui-Gon can then say, a little aggressive for a Padawan Obi-Wan, but it got the job done. And we start to see something of Obi-Wan as a character, because as it is when Qui-Gon later in the film says that he's headstrong, then everybody watching has to assume that there's some sort of EU book that they were supposed to read and didn't, because he never shows anything like that in this movie. The droid invasion stuff, though, and the music is amazing. It's a shame we've seen how utterly useless they all are. Capturing the Queen seems like something important that we should have seen. I mean, we saw the big army coming in, and we will later find out that there's escape tunnels, but she doesn't use them. Perhaps these are special escape tunnels that you can only use to break in through? Why does Qui-Gon put away his lightsaber when there are still droids to fight? Why doesn't he help Obi-Wan, who's still fighting them? You know, if you made your weapons a built-in part of your war machines, then you wouldn't have to worry about the enemy running off with them. This guy says there's too many of them and he doesn't want to attack, even though the Jedi annihilated about as many droids in the previous scene and Qui-Gon did half of it unarmed. These droids are just so annoying. They let all of those guys just walk up to them. These pilots sit on the ground and do nothing, even while Qui-Gon is killing these droids, and Obi-Wan is killing these droids. They don't even react when the droids start shooting over their heads. How does this droid get this close to Obi-Wan, and who the hell is it shooting at? The entire movie is like this. I know Ben Burt is a bit of a hero to Star Wars fans, but he's the editor of this film, and quite a lot of the things that make this an absolute chore to watch are things he should be fighting, literally, if necessary, to fix. The Phantom Menace is so bad, it is borderline unwatchable by any metric other than your age at the point that you first watched it. Star Wars was a movie that kids could enjoy. I first saw that when I was 6 or 7, and I wanted to grow up and have adventures like Luke and Han, but people that were the same age as the cast and those that were older could still enjoy the film. That's why the "it's a kids movie" argument is just a weak deflection of perfectly valid criticism. Kids don't want to grow up like Anakin, but they might want to be him in that moment, I guess. If you want to grow up like him, then you have to not mind turning into a half-butchered murderous despot in adulthood. For anyone older than Jake Lloyd, I don't see anything in this movie that should entertain you. Star Wars had charm, it had energy and spectacle. The Phantom Menace has just one of the three, and it doesn't really know what to do with it. And is it any better because the Jar Jar Abrahams trilogy exists? Absolutely not in any way. Treading in dog shit doesn't make treading in a cow pat any better. Happy 25th anniversary to the Phantom Menace. Some things get better with age, but disappointment and tedium, they stay the same.